At 2 in the morning, the sharp blaring of the alarm woke me from my sleep. There is a critical patient out of control. Please ensure your safety and evacuate immediately. My first instinct was to rush into the hallway to check on the patients. The long, narrow hospital corridor was eerily empty. The previously restless patients were now terrifyingly quiet. I checked each patient room one by one when suddenly, the alarm stopped, replaced by a heart-wrenching scream and a man's eerie laughter.
Are you ready? I'm coming to kill you all!
Hearing this voice sent a chill down my spine, and an unsettling feeling surged within me. I sprinted wildly toward the end of the corridor. In the dim light at the end, a patient room door stood wide open, and inside, there was no sign of the patient. He had escaped. The room was in complete disarray. Blood still dripped from the nearby wardrobe. I cautiously approached, and even though I was somewhat prepared for what I might find, the moment the wardrobe opened, I was still taken aback. Inside was Dr. Liu's body, folded into the cramped space, his bones shattered in a horrific display. My stomach lurched violently, and I couldn't help but gag. Just moments before, I had recognized the man's voice from the intercom. It was too vivid in my memory. The patient from room 411, a complete psychopath, was named Daniel Stone, admitted last month. I vividly recalled that day. He had been brought in with handcuffs by 2 men. I had seen many cases like this. He was clearly sent here for disturbing the peace and was undergoing forced treatment. Initially, I didn't pay much attention. Having worked here for so many years, I had encountered all kinds of patients. But Daniel made a deep impression on me. Unlike those who shouted,
I'm not sick!
He yelled, I'm going to kill you. I'll wipe you all out. I truly believed he would kill us if given the chance. He glanced at me and lunged straight for me, pinning me down and sinking his teeth into my neck, tearing away a chunk of flesh. When the staff pulled him off, his eyes were fixed on me, and he licked the blood from the corner of his mouth, a look of sheer enjoyment on his face. There was no humanity in his eyes, only a pure intent to kill and a thirst for death. He radiated hostility toward everyone, a complete maniac, a true psychopath. As it turned out, my instincts were right. According to the information provided by the hospital, Daniel was the perpetrator of a series of murders. I had seen reports about him on television before. It was him. I never imagined that Daniel Stone, this maniac, would end up in our hospital. The thought of having to stay here with him and take care of him filled me with an overwhelming fear. I didn't realize that the fleeting glance I had just exchanged with him would mark the beginning of my nightmare. Staring at the wrecked patient room and Dr. Liu's lifeless body left my mind blank. How had Daniel managed to break free, kill Dr. Liu, and escape? I couldn't think straight. All I could think about was calling the police. But when I reached for my phone to dial, there was nothing but emptiness. In the chaos of the alarm, I had been so focused on checking on the patients that I left my phone in the nurse's station. Fortunately, the distance from the patient room to the nurse's station wasn't too far. I grabbed a scalpel from the table and ran toward the nurse's station. Just as I reached the door, it suddenly swung open, and Daniel stepped out from inside. He was holding a scalpel in one hand, his clothes soaked in blood, while he slowly pulled out a phone with the other, and then smashed it hard onto the ground. I felt a sharp pain in my heart as I saw my phone, the latest model of iPhone, shattered on the floor. He had destroyed it beyond recognition. Daniel stared blankly at me, his mouth twisting into a strange laugh, which suddenly turned into sobs. I knew this wasn't the time to mourn my phone. It could be replaced, but my life was hanging by a thread. I tried to calm Daniel down while desperately thinking of a way to escape. Just then, the alarm in the hallway blared again, and I ran frantically down the corridor, with Daniel hot on my heels. An intense survival instinct fueled my legs, pushing me to keep running even when I was on the brink of collapse. Just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I spotted a door, a way out. Summoning the last of my strength, I dashed toward that door. For me, it wasn't just a door, it was my hope for survival. I fumbled for my access card to open the door, but froze when I realized it wasn't working. Undeterred, I swiped the card repeatedly, but the outcome remained the same: it wouldn't unlock. The glaring red alert light was a harsh reminder, piercing through my last shred of hope. In anger, I threw the access card away. Watching Daniel draw closer made my body tremble uncontrollably. I simply had no strength left to run anymore. I never thought that after working in a psychiatric hospital for so long, I would end up dying at the hands of a madman. I had only glanced at him once, yet it could cost me my life. Just as despair began to engulf me, the door of a nearby patient room opened unexpectedly. I used the last bit of my energy to run inside. As the door closed behind me, I finally sighed in relief. The director looked at me with concern.
Are you okay?
I replied urgently.
Director, please help me. Daniel Stone from room 411 has gone crazy. He killed Dr. Liu, and he will kill us. What do we do, Director?
I grasped at any hope, telling the director everything that had happened. He looked at me and gently reassured.
It's okay. I've already called the police. They'll be here soon. Just wait here, and you'll be safe.
Daniel stood at the door, shouting into the room. Come out. He's going to kill you, you'll die, and I'll die. I knew that if I stepped outside now, I would truly be dead. He would kill me for sure. I did my best to calm down and ignored Daniel. Seeing my indifference, he started violently banging on the door. Thankfully, this stainless steel security door was designed to prevent patients from escaping. After a while, he realized his efforts were futile and walked away. I looked around and noticed this patient room was different from the others, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why. There were no empty rooms in the hospital. Where had the patient from this room gone? And why was the director here in the middle of the night? I scrutinized the director, locking eyes with him. His gaze was deep, revealing a strange curve that I had seen in Daniel. I suddenly felt a sense of danger and began to be cautious around him. The sound of the door lock clicking open made my heart race. I immediately moved forward and, together with the director, braced ourselves against the door. Daniel slammed into the door like a wild beast. The door had a special design that could only be locked from the outside, unable to be locked from within. We were left to desperately hold our ground, and as a woman against a man in his prime, with the director's age over 50, it was only a matter of time before the door would be breached. Just when I didn't know what to do, the director whispered to me.
When I signal, let Daniel in.
At first, I didn't understand, but as I thought it over, I began to catch on. With Daniel crashing into the door, we just needed to open it the moment he lunged. He would surely lose his balance and fall. We could seize the opportunity to escape and lock the door from the outside, then we'd be safe. 3, 2, 1, at the moment Daniel crashed into the door, the director and I opened it simultaneously, and sure enough, Daniel stumbled inside, crashing heavily into the room. Seizing the moment, I rushed toward the exit, but the director suddenly pushed me. He didn't expect that I was braced for this, and I clung tightly to his arm, taking us both down to the floor. The director looked at me, confusion plain on his face. He thought he was playing his role well, but I had already sensed something was off the moment our eyes met. That same eerie glint I had seen in Daniel was in his eyes. Both men were mad. So when he said to let Daniel in, I had been on high alert. I had intended to run out and lock him inside with Daniel, but I was one step too late. If I wasn't going to survive, then neither of them would. Daniel lunged at us, swinging the scalpel in his hand. I ducked behind the director and pushed him with all my strength. The two of them immediately became entangled. Taking advantage of the chaos, I escaped and locked the patient room door behind me. I watched quietly as the two fought inside. I witnessed Daniel slice the director's throat with the scalpel, blood gushing out and staining Daniel from head to toe. I couldn't imagine that if I hadn't realized the director was a threat, I might be the one lying in a pool of blood right now. I waited at the exit until dawn, waiting for my colleagues to come for the shift change. I nearly cried out to the arriving officer. Please call for backup. Someone's trying to kill me, help me, save me. An hour later, in the dim interrogation room, Officer Zhou looked at me with a serious expression. He stared at me, a hint of a playful smile curling at the corners of his mouth, yet he remained silent, simply watching me intently.
Help me! Someone wants to kill me!
I screamed in despair, tugging at my hair.
Daniel, are you going to keep pretending? Daniel wants to kill me. He killed the doctor and the director. He's a madman!
Officer Zhou, visibly impatient, slammed a folder down onto the table, shouting, Enough! Stop pretending! Your psychiatric evaluation report is fake. You're not sick at all. Now tell us why you killed them. Confused, I asked.
Why does he call me Daniel? Isn't that the name of the insane person?
Officer Zhou's tone was stern and unyielding, as if stating a fact. As I met his inky eyes, I felt as though he could see right through me. I tucked away my earlier panic, smiled faintly, and asked,
Officer Zhou, do you know how a psychiatric patient proves to others that they're not sick?
Officer Joe was momentarily taken aback by my sudden question, swallowing the words he had been about to say. It's simple, just kill those who don't believe you. I pointed at him and burst into reckless laughter. Officer Joe was furious. He slammed his hand on the table and stood up, seemingly ready to strike me. Fortunately, a nearby officer managed to grab him in time.
Daniel, you lunatic, stop playing games. You've killed so many people, the evidence is overwhelming, and there's no escaping it.
Officer Joe shouted. Don't hit me, I'm sorry. Don't hit me. Please. I looked at him with a face full of terror, my body shaking uncontrollably. The officer in charge of the interrogation also appeared puzzled, and even Officer Joe's resolute gaze wavered slightly. The door to the interrogation room opened, and another officer handed a document to Officer Joe. After reading it, he suddenly smiled, raising the document to show me.
I have to admit, you're quite clever, pretending to be insane to commit murder and trying to exploit legal loopholes to avoid the death penalty. You acted so convincingly that you even fooled the psychiatrist, and we nearly fell for it too. Now, can you tell us why you killed them?
I glanced at the evaluation report, quickly suppressing the earlier fear, and coldly replied,
Because they all deserve to die. Officer Joe, don't you want to know why I killed them? Let me tell you a story. By the end, you'll understand.
Officer Joe nodded, intrigued. I'm curious to hear what story you can come up with. I began my tale.
A month ago, I noticed that my husband had become very strange, almost like he was a different person. He, who never used to dream, suddenly started dreaming. At first, I thought he was just sleepwalking and didn't pay much attention. But gradually, I realized things were going in a bizarre direction. I discovered that my husband would suddenly get up in the middle of the night and run to the kitchen, stuffing raw meat and eggs into his mouth. It was like he was a wild animal, eating as if he were ravenously hunting. But that wasn't the worst part. The most terrifying moment was when one night I woke up to find him standing at the foot of my bed with a kitchen knife. He was actually going to kill me. I was terrified and quickly tried to wake him, but he looked completely innocent, as if nothing had happened. I knew this was beyond simple sleepwalking. If left unchecked, my life could be in danger. So, I took my husband to see a psychiatrist. After understanding the situation, the doctor performed some tests, including a brain CT scan. After reviewing the results carefully, Doctor Who concluded that my husband was completely normal, his sleepwalking might be due to recent stress, and he just needed to take care of himself. Before we left, the doctor looked at me seriously and said softly, "Be careful of your husband."
Didn't the doctor say my husband was fine? At first, I didn't understand why the doctor had said that, but the events that followed made it clear he was trying to save me. After returning from the hospital, an uneasy feeling settled in my heart. I began to suffer from insomnia, plagued by nightmares, and could only manage to sleep for short periods each night. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of my husband holding raw meat and standing over me with a knife would flash in my mind. I was too terrified to sleep, fearing that if I fell asleep, he would kill me. I kept the words of the female doctor in mind. My husband wanted to harm me. At first, I didn't believe it, but everything changed one morning when something happened. My dog, whom I had raised for 5 years, had been killed, skinned alive, her bloody body stuffed into the refrigerator. When I opened the fridge door and screamed, you won't believe how my husband reacted. He was laughing. Yes, he looked at me and laughed. That was my dog, my companion for 5 years. Ever since my daughter passed away, she was the only one who stayed by my side. To me, she was more than just a pet, she was like my child. Yet, she was brutally killed by my husband. I stood in front of the fridge, staring at the bloody mess inside, filled with anger and fear. When I turned to face my husband, there was no trace of regret in his eyes, only indifference and a madness I had never seen before. Why did you do this? My voice trembled, on the verge of tears. He merely looked at me coldly before turning back to the kitchen. I stood there, overwhelmed with despair. I knew I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I had to leave, or I might become his next victim. I quickly went to my room to gather a few things, preparing to escape. Just as I stepped out, I saw my husband coming from the kitchen, a knife in hand, approaching me. My body froze instantly, my heartbeat thundered, and fear coiled around my heart like a cold snake. He had lost it. He was going to kill me. In that moment, one thought consumed me: escape. I turned and ran back into my room, shutting the door and locking it. I could hear his footsteps getting closer, pounding on the door with fury. I hid behind it, gasping for breath, grabbing my phone to call the police. I quickly explained my situation, telling them someone was trying to kill me and urging them to come fast. The police arrived shortly. I grabbed the officer's hand, relaying everything that had happened, but they looked at me with confusion after I finished. Just then, my husband spoke up.
I'm sorry, officers, for the trouble. My wife is having a bit of a problem.
He pointed to his head, took out his phone, and pulled up a video, handing it to the police. In the video, there I was, standing in front of the fridge in the middle of the night, gnawing on raw meat, and there I was again, standing by the bed with a knife. I pointed at him, shouting, "It's not me! It's not me! I'm not sick!" The police exchanged uncertain glances between my husband and me. Clearly, they were confused by our conflicting accounts. But I could distinctly feel their gaze toward me changing. It was the look they gave to patients. "Officers, you can't believe him. He's a madman. He wants to kill me." I tried to calm myself down, speaking as steadily as I could, but my voice still trembled. My husband stood beside me, wearing an innocent smile. "Officers, I'm really sorry. My wife's condition has worsened recently, and I apologize for troubling you." His tone was apologetic, and he kept expressing remorse while the officers' expressions grew increasingly impatient. Just as they seemed ready to leave, I hurriedly grabbed the sleeve of a female officer, desperately pulling up my shirt to show my scars. When the female officer saw my scars, her expression immediately turned serious. She stood protectively behind me, looking at my husband with scrutiny.
Did you do this to her?
A flicker of surprise crossed my husband's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. "Officers, how could I possibly hurt her? She did all of this to herself during her episodes. Sometimes, she even hits me." He feigned a wounded expression, his voice laced with sadness. I was about to respond when the police cut me off. "Given your current situation, we need to conduct further investigations. We hope you'll cooperate." Since we both accused each other of being mentally ill but had no way to prove anything, the police decided to take both my husband and me to the hospital for evaluations. At the hospital, I saw the female doctor again. Seeing her brought me a strange sense of comfort. But what she said next completely stunned me. "We've been here before, but your husband wasn't the one being assessed, it was you." As she pulled out the previous consultation records and examination reports before my astonished eyes, all the evidence pointed to me. I had inexplicably become the psychiatric patient.
Why would you do this?
What did he offer you? I questioned the doctor, who seemed a bit helpless and sympathetic. She softly explained, "Ms. Song, I know this is hard for you to accept. But you need to trust us. If you cooperate, we can provide proper treatment, and it can be resolved." I felt a wave of dizziness, unable to comprehend everything I was hearing. My memories told me it was all my husband's fault, yet the evidence in front of me pointed to me instead. I felt lost, unsure of what to do, shaking my head with tears welling in my eyes. "No, this can't be. I'm not sick. He's the one who's unwell. You all want to harm me." I pointed at them, feeling an unprecedented level of fear and helplessness. No one believed me, and no one was willing to help. After all the chaos, I became the psychiatric patient everyone talked about. My husband took me back home, confiscated my phone, and locked me inside, cutting off all my connections to the outside world. Ever since I had called the police, the neighbors were almost all aware of my situation. Their strange looks left me feeling exposed. To prevent me from escaping, he even brought in my mother-in-law to keep me company at home all day. I felt like I was being driven mad, starting to doubt my own memories and whether I might actually be unwell. Until one night, I overheard my husband and mother-in-law whispering in the living room, seemingly discussing property transfers and mental hospitals. Besides this, I also heard a terrifying truth. A year ago, my daughter's fall was not an accident, it was my mother-in-law who had accidentally pushed her off. My husband had conspired to lie to protect his mother. I could hardly believe my ears. Suppressing my rage, I rushed at them, wanting to tear their throats out, my fingers sinking deep into flesh, blood gushing forth, yet I felt no pain at all. I forced myself to calm down. A horrifying thought flashed through my mind. Didn't they say I was the insane one? Were they trying to drive me to madness? Then I would do as they wished and go completely insane in front of them. That night, while they were asleep, I picked up a knife and viciously slashed their throats, hacking them to death, one stroke after another. But this time, the police claimed I was pretending to be ill, attempting to escape legal repercussions. Everyone knew I was a psychiatric patient, a madwoman. This was all thanks to my damn husband and mother-in-law. If it weren't for their scheming, I could never have fooled so many people. I had spun a lie that deceived everyone, even myself. Officer Zhou, don't you think they really deserve to die? After listening to my story, Officer Zhou pondered for a moment, suddenly becoming serious as he said,
While it's true they did things that broke the law, you could have chosen to call the police. The law would have taken care of them.
I laughed. Officer Zhou, have you forgotten? I did call the police. 2 years ago, when my daughter fell, you were at the scene. A month ago, when I reported that my husband wanted to harm me, you were there too. But what did you do? When I needed help the most, you didn't do anything. No one believed me. I've come this far because of you all. Officer Zhou's expression changed, his face turning ashen as he looked at me.
Regardless, murder is a crime. You killed someone, and that's an indisputable fact. Even if your husband and mother-in-law have guilt, what about Dr. Liu and Director Wu? What wrongdoing did they commit that warranted your desire to kill them?
They are the ones who truly deserve to die. Officer Zhou, have you ever been to a psychiatric hospital? Do you understand what it's like there? Listen to me, and you'll see why I say this.
On the day I was sent to the psychiatric hospital, I ran into an old acquaintance, the female doctor who had treated me.
I didn't know why she was there, still wearing a nurse's uniform. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. However, from her lip movements, I could tell she was saying a name. I froze, a wave of inexplicable fear washing over me. It was a name I wished to forget, the name of my former best friend, Shen Wanqing. She was also my husband's ex-wife.
I had no idea why she said that name or how she knew it. The look in her eyes held a strange light, as if she reveled in my fear and confusion. She smiled at me, but that smile was filled with coldness.
My mind raced as I summarized the recent events, leading me to one conclusion: she and my husband were in this together, orchestrating everything from behind the scenes.
My husband's sleepwalking, the raw meat, even my daughter's accident, all of it was a meticulously planned scheme. Their goal was to drive me insane, to send me to a psychiatric hospital so they could easily seize my assets. Thinking of everything they had done to me ignited uncontrollable rage within me. I fought against my restraints with all my might, lunged at her, and sank my teeth into her neck. It was only when someone pulled me away that I tore off a chunk of flesh, licking the blood from the corner of my mouth with a look of satisfaction. She covered her neck with her hand, a cunning glint in her eyes, as if she reveled in her success. At first, I didn't know her purpose for being there, but soon she demonstrated to me what true suffering was. The walls of the psychiatric hospital were pale and cold, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant. I was locked in a small room, surrounded by walls with no windows or sunlight. Bound to the bed, I couldn't move at all.
I screamed desperately, insisting I wasn't sick, but all I received were mocking laughter and indifference from the staff. As night deepened, I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with thoughts about the female doctor and my husband's relationship. Why did she know Shen Wanqing's name? What was their connection? Suddenly, footsteps echoed down the hospital corridor, and the door swung open. The woman entered wearing a nurse's uniform, her eyes filled with amusement. Daniel, we meet again.
What do you want from me?
My voice trembled as I struggled to suppress my fear. She smiled, pulling out a photograph from her pocket.
Do you remember her?
My pupils dilated. The person in the photo was Shen Wanqing, and the woman next to her was me.
Who are you? What's your relationship with Shen Wanqing?
So you do remember her. She's my sister, my only family in this world. But you all killed her. Don't you think you all deserve to die? Her tone was calm, yet her eyes burned with rage.
I didn't do anything. It was all them forcing me. They're the real devils.
I screamed in despair, but her laughter only grew more joyful. There's plenty of time. I have many opportunities to play with you slowly. Despite her laughter, her tone was chilling, sending shivers down my spine. Shen Wanqing was my college classmate and my closest friend. After graduation, she quickly married, and her husband is Zhao Wei, who is now my husband. You might find it surprising, but our relationship is quite complicated.
After Shen Wanqing married Zhao Wei, they were very happy together. Zhao Wei treated her well, and even though he was married, our bond didn't weaken, it only grew stronger. Until the day of his 28th birthday, they invited me to their home to celebrate.
That day we were all very happy and drank a bit too much, getting quite drunk. The party went late into the night, and Shinwanshing, worried I'd encounter danger going home, suggested I spend the night at her place. I agreed without much thought, as I had often stayed over before, so it didn't raise any alarms for me.
I never expected that night would change everything. While I was deep in sleep, I suddenly sensed someone opening the door. By the time I realized what was happening, Zhao Wei had pounced on me, pinning me down and covering my mouth. Zhao Wei raped me, and afterwards, shockingly, he took photos with his phone as blackmail, warning me not to tell anyone. I felt filthy, scrubbing my body repeatedly in the bathroom, but no matter how much I washed, I could still smell the alcohol on my skin. I wanted to call the police, but the thought of those degrading photos stopped me. I told Shinwanshing about what happened that night, hoping she would see Zhao Wei for who he really was and leave him as soon as possible. However, her attitude utterly disappointed me. She accused me of seducing Zhao Wei and called me a vixen, shaming me for my audacity. We ended up in a huge fight, and it escalated badly. I thought I would have nothing to do with Shinwanshing again, but Zhao Wei found me again. He used those photos to blackmail me, making me satisfy his animalistic desires. He was nothing but a beast. If looks could kill, he would have died 1,000 times over. I endured it, but his increasingly aggressive behavior left me feeling desperate.
One day, he insisted I come to his house, claiming it would be more thrilling since Shinwanshing wasn't around. Unexpectedly, Shinwanshing returned home, bursting into a scene of chaos. Zhao Wei hurriedly tried to explain, and the two pushed each other from the bedroom to the balcony, arguing loudly. I didn't want to get involved, quietly gathering my clothes, preparing to sneak away.
Just as I was about to leave, Shinwanshing screamed, and the atmosphere turned tense. My heart sank as I realized that more trouble was on the way. Those two titans suddenly appeared exceptionally terrifying in my eyes. I knew that what happened tonight would change all our fates forever.
Just as I was about to leave, a scream came from the balcony, followed by a loud crash as something fell from a height. I rushed over to check, and from the 12th floor, I saw a blood-red flower blooming on the ground below. Panic set in as I pulled out my phone to call the police, but Zhao Wei snatched it away. He dragged me back into the living room and said sternly, "He's dead, and you're complicit. When the police arrive, how will you explain that we were caught in an affair? If I get arrested, you won't be spared either. I can ruin you completely." Zhao Wei's words pierced my heart like a sharp knife, making my body tremble uncontrollably. My mind spun in a daze, and I nearly collapsed to the ground.
What do you plan to do?
After a long silence, I finally managed to ask. Zhao Wei considered for a moment before revealing his plan to me. He wanted me to help stage Shinwanshing's death as an accident. We would prepare a set of false statements in advance to deal with the police's inquiries, hoping to successfully turn Shinwanshing's death into an accident. The incident of her falling to her death had become a buried scar in my heart. In the days that followed, Zhao Wei would come to see me daily, tormenting me in various ways.
Officer Zhou, do you know how they torture psychiatric patients? Every day, I was forced to take at least 10 different medications. If I didn't cooperate, they would grind the pills into powder, mix it with water, and insert a tube through my nose directly into my stomach to administer the drugs. They called this method nasogastric feeding. Can you imagine the feeling of having a tube penetrating your body?
There's more than one method of torture. They also had something called water therapy. They would fill a tub with hot water and then repeatedly push my head underwater for several moments before pulling it out, over and over, until I obeyed. Do you know when a psychiatric hospital is the most chaotic? It's at 1 or 2 in the morning when the hallway is filled with the screams of patients. That's because they're being jabbed with needles. Of course, they don't use real needles. Instead, they poke you with ballpoint pens all over your body, which leave barely any trace afterwards.
What I'm describing is merely the physical torment. There's also the psychological torture. They called it humiliation therapy, stripping me naked and binding me to the bed, then calling in a group of male doctors to surround me for various physical examinations, all aimed at humiliating me and destroying my spirit. The electroshock therapy you hear about so often? That's just a daily occurrence in psychiatric hospitals. Are patients really sick? Are the crazies truly insane? No one knows, and no one cares. Once you're in a psychiatric hospital, you are already deemed mentally ill. If you're not ill, you're guilty. Everything the doctors and nurses make you undergo in the psychiatric hospital is labeled as treatment, as being for your own good. During that time, I understood many things. It was all part of his meticulously planned scheme. From using my husband to set me up as mentally unstable to my killing my husband and mother-in-law and being sent to the psychiatric hospital, it was all a part of his plan to ruthlessly torment me day after day. Officer Joe, do you know? Even if I'm not insane and end up here, I will still be driven mad. Do you know how many floors the psychiatric hospital has?
Officer Zhou appeared momentarily taken aback by my sudden question but answered. 5 floors.
No, it has 6 floors.
I continued.
Do you know what each floor is for?
Officer Zhou's impatience grew at my seemingly nonsensical questions, and just as he was about to respond, I interrupted him. The hospital claims to have only 5 floors, but in reality, there are 6. 4 above ground and 2 below. The first floor is the family reception area, the second and third floors handle general light and moderate patients, the fourth floor houses aggressive patients like me, and the first underground level is a parking lot. As for the second underground level, only the director and Dr. Liu, along with some patients, know about it. They say there are only 5 floors to the outside world because the 6th level is a forbidden place, a real hell.
What's on the 6th floor?
Officer Zhou continued to ask. I hit my head hard in frustration, trying to remember something. Those painful and terrifying memories slowly resurfaced, and I began ripping at my own hair, trying to calm myself down. The 6th floor is hell. It's filled with dead bodies, so many corpses, their bodies hollowed out. Dr. Liu and the director, they are devils, they eat people. Don't come closer, don't kill me. I know I was wrong, I'll be obedient. Please don't kill me. The officers in charge of the interrogation were startled by my inexplicable behavior and rushed to calm me down. Only Officer Zhou maintained his gaze on me, observing my every move, searching for answers in my actions. The police took me back to the hospital for a detailed examination, but the results were unexpected. I was diagnosed with severe schizophrenia, and this condition had persisted for a long time. Even more shocking was that after the interrogation, Officer Zhou led a team to investigate the psychiatric hospital. They found the 6th floor scene described by me to be overwhelming. Several officers with weaker psychological endurance vomited on the spot. The 6th floor housed a massive pool filled with formaldehyde. Floating in it were various corpses. The stench overwhelmed anyone nearby, and some bodies couldn't even open their eyes. A commonality among the corpses was that they all had irregular wounds, with one or more organs missing. Investigations revealed that these bodies were all patients from the psychiatric hospital. The psychiatric hospital was shut down, and it was discovered that the director and Dr. Liu had been using the hospital as a cover for organ trafficking. They took in patients who had no family checking on them and harvested their organs for profit. Most disturbingly, during follow-up mental evaluations, many patients were found to be mentally normal and had no illness at all. Some had been forcibly committed by their families, while others were admitted for inexplicable reasons. But no one cared whether they were truly sick. Once you entered a psychiatric hospital, you were deemed ill. What awaited them was merely a transfer from one hospital to another, from one hell to another. Before being sent to a new psychiatric institution, Officer Zhou paid me a special visit. He asked me one question.
Are you really sick?
I couldn't fully answer him. Because even I didn't know if I was truly unwell at this point, but that didn't matter anymore.